Amemiya tonight. Andy's gone over a lot of basic housekeeping points, so I won't repeat those. But we would like to thank all of you for joining here and who will see us later after it's recorded. And we'll be sending out these videos to our various groups and posting them on our websites as well. There's three groups that are presenting tonight in order of Protect Our Ala Wai Watersheds, followed by Save Ala Moana Beach Park Hui, and then the Outdoor Circle. A little bit about our groups. These are all community-based groups that have been around either a long time or a shorter time, but we're active in our communities and we encourage you to do the same. Mr. Amemiya will have 2 minutes to answer after each question so that we can move pretty quickly through them because we have a whole bunch, but there's more on our website. So please do visit them where there's some written answers to these and many more questions as well. I'd like to give a special shout out and thanks for Andy for making our beautiful leis, and she delivered these to us and Mr. Amemiya, sourced from the area and made with a lot of aloha. Also to Corey Yap for keeping time, and Miles Ritchie for his technical support as well. A little bit about our groups. Protect Our Ala Wai Watersheds is an organization seeking to give ordinary citizens a voice in the design of the Ala Wai Flood Control Project and its construction, operations, and maintenance. They will be represented by Elton Fukumoto tonight. So if you just Google Protect Our Ala Wai Watersheds, you'll find out more information. Save Ala Moana Beach Park Hui was formed by a core of concerned citizens to heighten the public's awareness of the city's plans for Ala Moana Beach Regional Park and Magic Island, the People's Park, and to urge more civic engagement from the public. It's a place where everyone, rich, poor, old, young, local or tourist, can equally enjoy a day at the beach, jogging on the promenade, building sandcastles, exercising, or having a picnic on the lawn. It is a sanctuary and oasis, a kipuka, amidst concrete towers that are currently blocked out by the mountain and will be, but we come to Ala Moana as a place to keep healthy, have fun, and socialize for free. Shar Chun Lum will be representing this group, and she and her husband Bruce serve as its main communicators. SaveAlaMoanaBeachPark.org is their website, where there's a lot of great links, a way to sign up for newsletters and get instructions on testimony. Finally, the Outdoor Circle is a 108-wide statewide environmental nonprofit that works with branches throughout the state to protect Hawaii's unique natural beauty for current and future generations through community involvement projects, public education, and advocacy. We promote a Hawaii that is clean, green, beautiful, sustainable, and livable. For more information, please go to OutdoorCircle.org. And please go to all of our websites, check them out, and join our organizations. Our questions were chosen from our board members, from our members, and from the public at large. And as I mentioned, please visit our websites for more in-depth information and answers that Mr. Amemiya has written. Our guest tonight, and we thank him for coming, is Keith Amemiya, who has served Oahu as a community leader, nonprofit executive, business executive, and lawyer for over the last 30 years. Keith was born and raised on Oahu, and for 12 years served as the executive director of the Hawaii High School Athletics Association. In 2009, during state budget cuts that threatened public high school junior varsity sports, he spearheaded a Save Our Sports campaign that successfully kept athletic programs afloat. To this day, Keith has elevated high school sports within communities and state government as a way to address educational inequality and profoundly impact students' lives. Keith was most recently Senior Vice President of Island Holdings. He has also served as the University of Hawaii Board of Regents, as the Executive Administrator and Secretary, and as a civil litigation attorney. He has served on many community boards, including the Honolulu Police Commission and the Hawaii State Board of Education. Keith lives in Pauoa with his wife Bonnie of 24 years. Their son, Chris, recently completed his second degree of college on the mainland. And thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mr. Amemiya.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here, and we will go right away to our first group and let Protect Our Ala Wai Watersheds and Elton Fukumoto take over with his questions.
Mr. Amemiya, thank you very much for coming. I'm Elton Fukumoto. If I could just preface some of my remarks, we are concerned about the Ala Wai Canal project for flood mitigation That's our primary concern. And you, as the next mayor, will probably have the most important decision having to do with this particular project, because the current mayor does not look like he will sign the project partnership agreement with the Army Corps. Once that agreement is signed, then the project will be good to go. But we have some concerns about what needs to happen before the next mayor signs that particular agreement. So let me move on to the first question. The elements and design of the Army Corps of Engineers Ala Wai Flood Control Project have changed given new modeling results. Will you await the completion of a supplemental environmental impact study, or EIS, before making any decision on the project, including signing any project partnership agreement, or PPA, and committing any funding to the project? Why or why not?
Okay, thanks for the question. And before I start, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak before all three groups. It's an honor to speak before you, and I relish the opportunity to answer your questions and even get some insight from all of you as well. Before I get into the question, I just want to clarify. So my son just finished his second year of college. He didn't get 2 degrees yet. I wish he got 2 degrees, but he doesn't. He barely has half a degree, so he's halfway there. Um, uh, and hopefully he finishes school because it's very expensive, his college on the mainland. But anyway, and then is it Andrea or Andy who brought the lei to my office? So thank you for the lei. It kind of blends in with my shirt, but nicely.
yeah.
But yeah, it's a very beautiful lei. And then you brought mamaki tea, which is excellent. I'm using a compostable cup, by the way. It's environmentally friendly, but I have the mamaki tea that she brought. Oh, I'm getting timed already for my answer, so I better hurry and answer the question. So, yes, I mean, I would like to see or await the completion of the supplemental EIS. I want to see what it says before making any decision. It's important to see what's in that. I also would like to get input from the community, including your groups, including not only the Protect Ala Wai group, but people who live in the affected areas. I need to make sure that you're properly consulted and provide your input, because you're going to be directly affected. Not me. I live in Paoa. And so I want to hear what you have to say. I have 3 seconds to say that I know Dave Watase lives in the area and he's a good friend, and I don't want to get Dave mad. So I'm definitely going to include Mr. Watase in any decision-making process. Next question.
Okay, we think that's an excellent answer.
Okay, good.
Next question, as mayor, would you give the public an opportunity to review the public partnership agreement before it is signed? Why or why not?
I would. I mean, I believe that's part of the problem or concerns that all of you have about how this process started from the beginning, that there was not enough consultation, not enough communication, not enough transparency. I'm a lawyer by trade, so my gut tells me I don't know how much of the PPA can be shared with the public, but as much as can be shared, if everything can be shared, that's fantastic. But whatever can be shared, I'm willing and able. In fact, I mean, that's essential that it gets shared. It shouldn't be an option. So I support sharing that agreement. I welcome the input of all of you in terms of what it entails and what your feedback is. So my answer is yes, I would. I would also add, since I have time to answer this question, that from a broader perspective, I want to make sure every project in every community has meaningful feedback and communication with the communities. And so to that end, I want to create an Office of Community Engagement whose sole purpose is to go out into communities, to get feedback, to hear your concerns, to get ideas from you way before a project, especially one of this magnitude, is proposed. You were involved, I think, or I know, late in the process, and if not for the persistence and bulldogishness of people like Dave Watase, I mean, who knows what would have happened to the plan and the project. And so I want to get people like yourselves engaged much sooner via the Office of Community Engagement. And I think we'll minimize a lot of the problems that have occurred in the past and a lot of controversies between the current city administration and the public.
Okay. Next question. How secure do you feel about the remainder of a project where over half of the original project was based on incorrect information and assumptions?
And then there's a second part, right? Is there anything in the
Okay. Is there anything in the revised plan in particular that you feel uncomfortable with?
Okay. Well, I mean, it's clearly a concern, you know, if there was incorrect information the first go around. So I would be remiss if I was not extra diligent to make sure that uh, there aren't any more major mistakes or errors or omissions. And well, that's part of also why we need maximum transparency. It's better to have as many sets of eyes on a project and on a particular document. So as a follow-up to the prior question, transparency is key, it's paramount. And so, yes, I mean, it concerns me. And so that's why we need as many people and groups looking at any document as possible. There's no terms that I would say, I mean, I don't know if I'm uncomfortable with anything. I don't know enough, to be honest. I've kind of looked at it, but I need to look at it much more carefully. And I would continue to review it in consultation with people like you in the community. And if
As
there's specific concerns, I mean, please, you know, whether it's right now or later, you know, I welcome the feedback and areas that you may be uncomfortable with Elton or anyone else in your group.
as a follow-up to your question, your office sounds really interesting. In the case of this federal project, however, uh, the federal government, the Army Corps comes down and says, okay, this is the project. You can make only small changes in it. It's gone through several levels of review. The science is perfect. And so we can't make very many changes. So what happens is, this is the project, take it or leave it. And how would your office react to that? How would you be able to affect a federal project?
Well, I think that's wrong, and there's got to be a way around that. To have to just accept what the Army Corps is telling us, and that we have no choice. I would engage our congressional delegation. I'm fairly close to all of them, including our senior senator Brian Schatz, who's taken an active role recently in the project to make sure that the problems that were occurring early on without meaningful input from all of you took place. And so, you know, it's clear that, you know, he will make sure that the problems that existed before don't happen again. One way that you folks can help and what the Army Corps of Engineers should have done in the first place is to disseminate the information for public comment much earlier. And that's where I would rely on your organization and all of you to help me in that regard.
And if I could follow up to your follow-up, you mentioned Senator Schatz.
Mm-hmm.
So we've heard rumors, and we don't really know, but we've heard rumors that Senator Schatz is a really big supporter of this project, and he was trying to, as it were, force it through. Does your relationship with Senator Schatz as a former campaign manager, would you be influenced by your relationship with Senator Schatz to perhaps try to push this project forward?
No, if I wouldn't fast track it just because Senator Schatz wants it to be fast tracked or pushed through. I know that we've spoken about this specific project fairly recently, and he's very concerned. He's aware of the community concerns, the community uproar before. I know he's told the Army Corps to address the concerns that they may have, and uh, if he tried to fast track it, I would say he tried to fast track it to secure the money for the project. Now, in terms of the details of the project, I don't think he's trying to ramrod any particular design of the project per se. That he's very concerned about your concerns and the issues raised, and he just wants a project that works, that ensures the health, safety, and welfare of the communities, has minimal impact on the communities during the construction phase of the project, and that it's funded. You know, it's a very expensive project, especially with COVID-19. Money is going to even be more difficult to come by. And so if there was any rush on his part, I feel it's truly just from the standpoint he wanted to preserve the funding so that it didn't go to another project in another state.
Mhm. But you as or the next mayor will have a lot of power because you will be able to decide to sign or not sign. So whatever pressure you feel, you will be the decider on this one.
That's correct. I won't be influenced by anyone, including Senator Schatz. I will only be influenced by what's best for the people of Oahu and especially the affected communities like yours.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. When Governor Ige's request to fund the Ala Wai project was turned down by the legislature, he decided to go around the legislature and fund it by using certificates of participation, or COPs, on the New York bond market. This sale was halted by Protect Our Ala Wai Watersheds' successful lawsuit. COPs are not general obligation bonds and are not backed by the full faith and credit of the state. Therefore, the state must offer a higher rate of return in order to sell them. As mayor, would you be in favor of funding the Ala Wai project by COPs, or would you wait for a legislative appropriation? How do you think the taxpayers would feel about this?
You know, I'm only through this project learning about COPs, and I'm certainly not an expert in it. And so, I my my limited knowledge and my intuition says to prefer a legislative appropriation, you know, but the bottom line is I want the project funded. I want it to happen because it'll greatly reduce, you know, any flooding risk and damage to your communities and Waikiki if properly done and properly vetted. My main concern is that I get community input from people like yourselves and your organization, even on whether to go via legislative appropriation or the COPS approach, or both, or either, and that you're indifferent. My main concern is that you get the opportunity to provide input before the plan is finalized.
Okay, I'll move on to a similar question. Last year, Senate Bill 2322, which would have capped any project funded by COPS at $10 million, failed in the House. If a similar measure were introduced next session, would you be in favor of it? Why or why not?
Well, like in my previous answer, I prefer that funding be through the legislative process. And so that's the way I would want to go. That's the way I'd advocate doing so. And in terms of the legislature capping any project funded by COPS at $10 million, well, that's, if that passed, I mean, it kind of renders the COPS option moot, in my opinion, because we're going to need far more than $10 million. But I'd have to review the legislation and understand truly, you know, and fully what it means, what its impact is. But, you know, if I had my druthers, I would support going through a legislative appropriation as opposed to the COPS method.
Okay. Next question. It appears that the current mayor would not sign the project partnership agreement with the Army Corps until and unless the state came up with the entire $125 million through the sale of COPs or other means. Will you as mayor also wait, or will you sign before getting the money from the state, potentially making the city liable for providing part or all of the $125 million?
Right now, I'm inclined to wait because the city doesn't have the 125 million if it's left to foot the bill by itself. So obviously, from the city standpoint, and as mayor and as the steward of city taxpayers' money, I would prefer that the legislature cover that cost. I'm too concerned about not being able to come up with any part of that $125 million, especially with COVID-19. The city's budget will be likely stretched thin as it is. So I prefer not to sign it at this point, but like everything I've said on every answer today, I welcome input and feedback from your group and the individuals that comprise your group, or any other people or groups that are stakeholders or interested parties in this project. And as you know, even after the project is completed, the city is still going to be responsible, as far as I know, for all the maintenance and upkeep of the project. And so it's going to have to pay its share afterwards. So any money that can come from an outside source in terms of the construction of the project, then I fully support that.
Okay. I think this is going to be my last question. Any cost overruns in this project will be shouldered by the city taxpayers. How will you protect against cost overruns?
Well, whatever they did at the beginning of the rail project up till now, don't do that. We we need to do something much different. We need to not rush the project through like they did in rail. We need to be much more careful about the contracts and agreements that we sign. As mayor, I'll be very diligent, hyper vigilant about this project for many, many different reasons, including cost overruns. It's a very large scale project, although important, it's an expensive project. So I'll make sure that we proceed prudently, efficiently, and carefully, and learn. I mean, I kind of joke, but I'm serious that we need to learn from the mistakes of the process of rail and what was done, and make sure we don't do what was done in that project, so that the Ala Wai doesn't become another boondoggle.
Okay. I think my time is up, so I'm going to hand this over to Shar Chun Lam of Save Ala Moana Beach Park Hui. Shar?
Let me unmute myself first. Okay. Good evening, Keith. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask the first question. For more than 4 years, the community spoke out against the master plans that would not only be costly, but also change the way the people have enjoyed the People's Park, Ala Moana Beach Park. We just want to keep it clean and keep it green. So currently, work on Magic Island parking lot has been going on for 7 months now. And completing this will provide double the current parking spaces for park users, relieving much of the congestion. Therefore, some question the need to proceed with expanding the keyhole parking lot, destroying green space noted in the park's historic designation. What are your thoughts on more work being done at Ala Moana Beach Park?
So I would just start by saying that I spent a lot of time when I was a young child through my teenage years at Ala Moana Park. So I have fond memories of the park. I love the park, and like many of the users and members of your organization, love the park and want to preserve it as much as possible. So I support that. I support as much as possible the open spaces that it has, and the way it currently is. It's quite nice as far as I'm concerned. It could certainly use sprucing up and improvements and upkeep and repairs and maintenance. But I'm in support of the general consensus that I get from you, Shar, and the other members of your group, that we want to preserve the what makes it so great and nice. It's simple, but preserves the natural beauty. There's not a lot you have to do because it's such a spectacular locale. But like any public resource, it definitely needs upgrading. I was surprised how long it takes to resurface a parking lot. I learned a lot, and so I haven't gone to Ala Park recently because some of the regulars, which I'm sure many of you are, say that you have to go sometimes before sunrise to make sure you get parking. And I love Ala Park, but and I'm in the middle of a campaign, so I can't afford to get up at 4 a.m. and make sure I get there by 5 a.m. But hopefully the project is on time and on budget. Those are somewhat novel concepts in terms of government projects, but is it supposed to be finished by November?
It's supposed to be finished by October 15th, but we're questioning whether that's true. And apparently what they wanted to do was to start on the keyhole as soon as it was finished. So that would be another construction project. And that's why we're questioning whether there is a need. We really prefer that they do a survey and figure out if there's still a need after that parking lot is open, because it's about 500 spaces. So
Okay.
Moving on to the second question. Okay,
Sure.
the Ala Wai Canal, Kapiolani Park, Moana Beach Park, and Diamond Head are all listed on the Hawaii State Register of Historic Places for their protection and preservation as historic sites and landscapes. The Honolulu Historic Preservation Commission was enacted in 1993, but to date, no mayor has appointed its qualified members as required by the city's ordinance. If elected, how would you ensure that the Honolulu Historic Preservation Commission's members are appointed so the commission can function as intended?
Okay. Well, if you folks don't mind, I'm going to use some of the time to answer this question to finish my answer to the prior question. And so, just like a lot of the issues that came up with the Ala Wai flood mitigation plan, there's not been enough public input and feedback well before repaving of parking lots or other improvements were planned for, or removal of trees were planned for Ala Park. And so as your mayor, I pledge to make sure that we bring all of you to the table much sooner to get your feedback and to get your input. And that'll be a prime function of the Office of Community Engagement. And it's a major reason, in my view, why there's so many controversies across Oahu over the past couple of years, whether it's Ala Park or Sherwood Forest or the Kohuku wind farms or windmills. We need to get the public engaged much sooner. And sometimes I think, and it's a big reason I'm running for mayor, is for whatever reason, it's no one person's fault. In my view, the government's lost its way and forgot what it's there for, and that's to work in the best interest of people, especially working class people, and to make people's lives better, not more difficult and not more complicated. And so as mayor, I pledge to do that and work more closely with groups like yours. In terms of the Historic Preservation Commission, I'm not sure why it's never been activated, but as mayor, I will look into that and find out why it hasn't been. But barring any valid excuse or reason, let's activate the commission and start appointing members and get it going after nearly 30 years from the time it was authorized.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to jump to actually question number 4 because it sort of ties in with your point that you've made a couple times about the Office of Community Engagement. And basically, what we just said, the mayor sometimes minimalized our input for various issues, whether it be Beakey or Sherwoods or Moana Beach Park or Blaisdell. And so you're talking about an Office of Community Engagement. Now, given the current situation in terms of finance, in terms of the COVID affecting the income of the city, would this office how would you form the office in terms of people that you need to, if would you shut another office down, or how would you fund that office? Because, right now we heard people might have to go on furloughs actually. So my question would be, I mean, it's a nice idea, but how will you fund it?
No, that's a valid question. The office is going to be much smaller than a department. I mean, department is tens of millions of dollars or more. An office, I mean, I don't know how many people are going to be in it, but it's not going to be hundreds of people. It's going to be, I mean, 25 at the most. I mean, I think that's even is much too high. It'll probably be some repurposing of money from another office or department, but in the huge scheme of the city budget, which is about $3 billion, it's going to be a small fraction of the total city budget. But I think that communication, or the lack thereof, is so important. We need to allocate money to create that office to minimize problems and controversies that have popped up far too often in the last couple of years under the current administration.
Okay, so one of the offices, I'm going back to one of the departments, the large departments. This is question number 3, related to question number 3. City parks paid for by taxpayers' dollars should be open, clean, and safe for its citizens. The last 2 city audits of the Department of Parks and Recreation reconfirmed numerous outstanding deficiencies and budget inequities, and recommended various corrective actions. Yet many problems remain without adequate DPR commitment to improve or correct the measures. What will you do to address this situation? I mean, I know, for example, DPR has had a long withstanding, like 25% vacancy rate. How would you make sure that DPR is doing its job?
Well, I have a couple responses. First, there's a lot of audits out there. They're very insightful. They're very helpful. There's even an audit that was recently issued for the Department of Planning and Permitting to address why building permits take so long to be approved. So similarly, the DPR has received its share of audits. And to me, it's a matter of political will. It's a matter of the next mayor actually reading the audit and executing on what the audit is recommending. In terms of the staffing shortages at DPR, I mean, don't get me wrong, COVID-19 is by and large very bad for all of us in so many ways, but it is an opportunity to fill the approximately 1,700 city employee vacancies out of the 10,000 employee workforce that the city is budgeted for, to fill them through people who have been impacted by COVID-19, and by impacted meaning that they've lost their jobs, especially in the tourism industry. Many of them won't get their jobs back right away. Many of them won't get their jobs back at all. I don't think this recovery is going to be quick. And so this is a perfect opportunity to recruit people to work for the city. City government may not pay as high as the private sector, but it provides stability, much more stability than the private sector in many cases. If you work at the city long enough, you have very solid pay eventually, and benefits, and good retirement as well. So I would actively recruit, especially the tourism industry or other industries, maybe the restaurant industry that's been impacted by COVID-19, and see if we can fill those spots. The last way I would address the deficiencies of our park facilities is public-private partnerships. When I was running the Hawaii High School Athletic Association, we used retirees who love baseball, for example, to manicure and maintain the fields on a volunteer basis. And that was a huge benefit to supplement the shortage of DPR employees who couldn't maintain those fields.
Thank you, Mr. Amemiya. I have to move on to the next question because we're
sorry.
running out of time. Sorry. Okay, the COVID-19 epidemic has clearly demonstrated that our economy is too dependent on environmentally unstable levels of tourism and dependency on imported foods. What are your plans to diversify the economy and create food sustainability?
Well, COVID-19 has exposed what we've talked about for decades. It seems that we're over-reliant on tourism, and that we need to diversify our economy. And so If we don't diversify our economy now, with the lessons learned about COVID-19 and our over-reliance on the tourism industry, I mean, we're never going to. So we will, when I become the next mayor. We will focus on industries that will be conducive or natural to Oahu and fill a void on Oahu, and that's agriculture, aquaculture, renewable energy, high technology or information technology, and healthcare. The pieces are in place to kickstart those industries. The city can play a major role. In agriculture, the city can provide grants to help farmers get their farms going, or their industries or their crops going. The city can also lease city lands for low annual rates to help and assist farmers and to grow the agriculture industry. The state does its fair share. State Senator Donovan De La Cruz has a project like that in the Whitmore area. And so I would try to replicate what's working in that area and try to apply it to private lands or even city lands. But it's clear that we need to diversify the economy, and that's one of my priorities as your next mayor.
Okay, thank you. This is a two-part question. This is leadership. How will you choose the people to fill your cabinet and department head positions? And will the public have the opportunity to review and or comment on these individuals? And the second question is, the mayor holds the executive stewardship role for the people of Honolulu. Holding a second job while mayor or board positions on other businesses and organizations can create a conflict of interest. How will you ensure the public that you will not be influenced by conflicts of interest?
Okay, well, maybe I'm a naive first-time candidate, but people assume that I already have my department heads or my cabinet filled, but I assure you I haven't. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I need to win the election and become mayor before I can worry about who specifically is going to be running my respective departments. But I can assure you that my administration will reflect the community. It'll be diverse. It'll be, again, a very diverse group, whether it's, making sure that both genders are well represented, ethnicities are well represented, communities are well represented, and on and on. And I like to tell people that, I believe that how you run your campaign is a good indication or reflection of how you're going to govern. My campaign team is very diverse. There's equal representation, in fact, disproportionate representation, which is great. I have far more women on my executive team for my campaign than men. I have a multitude of ethnicities, people from various communities across Oahu, and so I'll carry that type of thinking into the mayor's seat should I be fortunate enough to win. Now, tell me again, what's the other
question? Second question is about conflict of interest. As you know, the mayor's been criticized for having held a board seat where he's getting paid more than being mayor, and then also being on other boards. And the question is whether this will influence your decision making. How can we be assured that other interests that you may have don't override some of the decisions that might be best?
So, if I'm not mistaken, the legislature passed a law banning that anyway from happening. So it's moot, but I'm not planning on getting a second job. I don't know how anyone can have a second job. The mayor's job is equal to like 10 jobs. And so I'm not planning on getting anything other than to devote my full attention to be mayor for all of you.
Thank you. Okay, I think I have time for one more question. Is that right, or am I too long? Okay, so this is a question about some of the DPP things that you could do. So Kaka'ako is in an area that's vulnerable to sea level rise, yet we continue to see more high rises being built in this area. What would you do to halt development in areas that are affected by sea level rise?
Well, the city has wide latitude in approving projects, so that's one way to halt the development. But I also believe that before even having to halt development, we need to bring the stakeholders to the table, including developers, and talk to them and listen to them and hear what they have to say about why they want to build in a flood-prone area to begin with, or an area that's going to be prone to the effects of the impending sea level rise that we're all facing via climate change. So that's two things I would do as starters: is regulate future development through whether to approve a permit or not. But even before that, talk to the key stakeholders, including developers. And now in terms of long-term development, I would focus on development along the rail line via transit-oriented development. There are several areas along the rail line that are not in areas that will be impacted or not impacted as early as other parts of the rail line, like the one on the Ala Moana end. There's a lot of rail stations along the Ewa Plains, starting in Kapolei. And so that's where you would focus or push the development as opposed to towards town and the Ala Moana area.
Thank you. And I'd have a couple more questions, but I know I need to switch over to the outdoor circle. So thank you, Keith. I'm going to switch you over to Winston.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shar, and thank you again, Keith, for joining us today. And for those watching, we did provide these questions in advance to our candidates, and we also coordinated with each other because we have a lot of common interests. And I think one of those is that residents feel like they've been frequently left out of discussions and decision making in their neighborhoods until plans are too late or costs are too expensive to change to address their concerns. So it's heartening to hear about the plans that you have for an Office of Community Engagement to really just get people in from the very start. So I will skip my first question and go on to the next one, which is about Magic Island and the trees that were recently cut down and how that leads into the mayor's directive. So during the COVID closures, a bunch of trees cut down. That led to very good action by the mayor's office and Georgia Deemer, and issuing the mayor's directive effective July 1st. And this is about trees and what the city is supposed to do about it. It's a very positive step, but the directive only requires that relevant city departments notify the public for projects that impact trees. And it specifically names the outdoor circle, neighborhood boards, and other community parties, but it is not a requirement to engage the community and engage it meaningfully. And often we see notification as something that happens when it does as the day before destructions of trees, for example. That's useless. As mayor, how would you ensure that the departments follow directives and plans regarding trees in their planting, management, maintenance, and if needed, removal and replacement? What system of monitoring and accountability would you require?
Well, I would try to set up a process in place to determine when a tree will be removed and how you will get the stakeholders involved and provide input, and then how much lead time you should give before cutting down the tree if you choose to do so. Obviously, 24 hours is not enough. And again, that's the recurring theme and issue and frustration people have with the current city government, that they don't feel that they're being heard or listened to. And so, that's why I propose the Office of Community Engagement. So I would get the public involved much sooner, especially when it comes to trees. Before I started the campaign for mayor in August of 2019, I knew trees were important and I like trees, but I learned more and more how important trees are for so many different reasons, including climate change and of course the environment as well. And so I'm a proponent of growing more trees on Oahu, planting more trees, and I'm also much more sensitive to the removal of trees. I mentioned that my son is in college and he's in Generation Z, and they're very civic minded, they're socially aware, they are concerned about climate change. So he reminds me about the importance of trees. So my point is that as mayor, I'm going to make sure that we don't go and start cutting trees without giving proper notice to the various stakeholders before we do that.
Very good. And thank you for that. And that goes to my next question. is that this directive, as it's currently written, and beyond that, it doesn't actually commit the city to funding and to mechanisms that would take us from about the 20% tree canopy coverage that we have now to the 35% by 2035, as the goal stated by the city council and the mayor. And while there's a lot of talk about cooler and beautiful streetscapes and increasing the tree canopy, in reality, really very few new trees or net trees are planted and maintained. And we witness a lot of large trees being removed all over the city. And it's tragic and unnecessarily so. We, meaning all of us, need to rethink how we can best achieve a mass tree canopy coverage. And this necessitates doing things much differently than we've been doing now, from basic streetscape planting plans like planting in strips where they're too narrow to effectively maintain trees and other issues. So my question is, how can you change this talk into action with the city as a leader and a champion, given the requirement of a major need to allocate funding, planning, and personnel?
Well, like a lot of big initiatives, it's going to take political will, and it's going to take an honest, sincere commitment from the mayor. And climate change is a huge issue for me, and trees are a big part of climate change mitigation and just beautification of the city in general. So I give you my word that it's an important part of my administration, and when I take office as mayor. In terms of funding it, that's a good question, and I've already thought of some ideas. I mean, there's a lot of environmental groups that are interested in these initiatives, or foundations, and so I would look for city funding first and foremost, but also if there's federal funding or funding from outside environmental groups or environmental-based foundations, or even philanthropists. I learned when I ran high school sports that there's never enough money for the public schools for things from textbooks to basketballs and volleyballs. And so I learned that you have to be resourceful, and you have to sometimes look outside of government for partnerships. And that's the route I plan on doing in terms of adding trees and making sure that we have enough commitment to planting more trees in the next 10 years.
Thank you. So I would just take that to be that you see a very active role for community groups to work with your administration in this, to protect
Absolutely.
planting more trees. That's terrific. And I want to skip to my next question because you have just answered that. And so let's go on to an issue that's also near and dear to many people's hearts, which is about the U.S. Army Corps plan involving at least using part of the Ala Wai Golf Course as an emergency water retention basin. The golf course is currently part of a legally, scenically protected, important landscape that forbids development and buildings. And recently, the current administration had floated the idea of a Topgolf type development in the land, which would destroy the existing protected view plane and commercialize that space. Some others favor returning the golf course into a wetland or a traditional Hawaiian purpose, or an open park, or some combination of these uses. But I guess the main question is, would you commit the city to keep this space free from development, especially and specifically commercial development, and of any new buildings, so that we maintain and preserve the open area and view plane as it is now legally protected?
So, like a lot of the questions that I was asked earlier, I'm going to engage the community and get input from all of you. This is the one question or my answer that, well, initially you may not have liked, because I'm a occasional golfer, and I've been to Top Golf on the mainland, and it's a pretty attractive facility. They're popular, but that's why I'm all for community engagement and hearing from stakeholders, because I didn't realize there's a lot of people don't like it. I'm open to it, and obviously what I used to like or prefer is not going to dictate what I do as mayor. I'm here to represent the communities that are in the surrounding area, and the reason I thought about Top Golf as a viable alternative is if you've been to the current Ala Wai driving range, it clearly is not so nice. I mean, definitely the one thing I'm adamant about is whatever we do, don't keep it the way it is. It has something needs to be done to that area. And so again, this is where open dialogue and communication and meaningful feedback is important to get as the mayor and as the city before making any decisions to build a Top Golf type facility. And my understanding is that this is probably moot anyway, that Top Golf has put their plans to develop or upgrade the Ala Wai driving range to a Top Golf facility is on hold, and that Top Golf is probably not going to come here anyway. But the bottom line is, as a general premise, I'm in support of preserving open space, like the Ala Wai Golf Course.
Thank you. And I think people aren't against Top Golf at all. I mean, they could go over the proposed, Aloha Stadium redo, or maybe out in Kapolei or somewhere else. It's just in that area. So thank you for
Fair enough.
Next one is the one that you have to address, obviously, and that people are concerned about. And maybe there's not enough time to adequately address it here, but it's about rail. People are concerned about the rising cost. Of course, now that the city pulled out of the P3, post-COVID ridership questions, maintenance costs, current planned routing, which will have portions of the route in regularly flooded areas by the next decade, according to city projections. Some have suggested stopping it at Iwilei Ala Station, or as proposed and advertised recently. Others have it stopping at Middle Street. Both versions use buses or street level, like tram cars, to complete the routes to go to Waikiki, Kaimuki, Kahala, University, Ala Moana, and the King Beretania corridor. What do you think of these alternatives?
What I think of these alternatives is I've learned about rail as I've studied it and talked about it with people. There is no easy alternative, and every alternative is complicated and difficult and expensive. So my job as mayor is to find the best alternative given all the factors: cost, time it'll take, impact on the communities. And so just like Ala Wai Golf Course and just like Ala Moana Park, I'm going to engage the community and hear what they have to say. But from what I know so far, we need to do what we can to finish rail at its intended final destination, and that's Ala Moana Center, for a lot of reasons. Again, I'm just as frustrated and upset at people with all of you as to why it's taken so long, why it's so way over budget. We need to make sure that those same problems don't exist. But rail is an important part of a multimodal transportation that our island sorely needs. We need to not just accommodate cars, we need to accommodate rail, bus, bicycles, and pedestrians. And so rail is an important component of a truly thriving city. Not only is rail important, the transit-oriented development that comes with rail is important. Each rail station I envision as like a city within a city, as you've seen in other cities with successful rail systems like Tokyo, Singapore, and Vancouver. Rail stations can provide affordable housing, restaurant, retail, entertainment. It creates a walkable, livable city that people can afford.
And yes, and thank you for that answer. Would you be open to the idea of shifting the rail up to a King or Beretania, or that sort of idea, and having it go better, say, to the university than the Ala Moana route, or is that something that you feel like it should be going to Ala Moana where it's been planned?
I mean, ultimately, I think it should finish at the University of Hawaii Manoa, and for a lot of reasons, including, ideally, rail would go from Ala Moana past Waikiki and end up at UH Manoa. And my fast answer to why is because pre-COVID, when UH was in session, University of Hawaii Manoa, traffic was horrendous. When they're not in session, traffic is pretty good. And so I'm not always the smartest guy, but there's got to be a correlation between UH Manoa being in session and not, and the impact on traffic. So if we can provide people with another way to get to UH Manoa without getting in their cars, that's going to be better for everybody involved. You know, the problem real quickly with the other alternatives, stop at Middle Street, stop in Chinatown, or anything other than stopping at Ala Moana. First of all, the agreement with the federal government is that if we don't complete rail to Ala Moana as we promised them, there's the risk that we have to return the $800 million that we already received in federal subsidies. There's also the risk that we won't get the additional $700 million that the federal government promised to help fund the rail project. And the other problem about deviating from the Ala Moana completion is that you may need to perform another, the city may need to perform another environmental impact statement. And Lord knows how long more that's going to delay the rail project if that's really the requirement, but that's my understanding. So we're in a pickle no matter which way we go.
Yes, we are. If it's okay, and you're willing to stay an extra 5 minutes, we have some important questions we wanted to ask, and I'm going to hit those first.
Sure.
What do you think about how can we do with Red Hill? The tanks are rusting. The Board of Water Supply wants them replaced. What's your position on that?
If I'm not mistaken, Winston, the city or federal government has till 2045 to remedy the situation. Does that sound right? Or it's way down the road. Well, first of all, that's way too long from now. And of the many, many issues that worry me, should I become the next mayor, that's near the top of the list because any, contamination of our water source would be catastrophic to our island. So we have to make sure that doesn't happen. And so as mayor, even though I don't think the city and the mayor has direct control and influence, I will weigh in because it's going to impact our entire island if any of those tanks should rupture or leak severely. And so I'm committed to looking into that and seeing what can be done. But we have to start planning and doing something now and not wait several years down the road, because that would be incredibly catastrophic if something should happen to one or more of those fuel tanks.
Yeah, and it's scary when you listen to the Board of Water Supply saying there's a 1/4 inch of rusting steel between, that's it. A similar question about the landfill. We are filling up at Waimanalo Gulch. The PBT landfill has said they're withdrawing their application to expand. What should we be doing about our trash situation? Where are we going to put our trash?
Well, that's another complicated issue. One aspect of this issue that doesn't get brought up enough, in my opinion, is that we as a society have to create less trash in the long run. We just create too much rubbish. We need to, recycle, reuse. We need to, get away from our reliance on plastics. We need to, not use takeout containers so much, and plastic. Well, that's going to be banned soon, but plastic forks and knives and spoons and straws. I mean, we need to bring like those little kits that you have when you go eat and just learn to change our behavior and have reusable forks, knives, spoons, and what have you. In terms of the Waimanalo Gulch in particular, I know that the city is looking at alternative sites, and so as mayor, I'll have to look at the various options and see if there's other viable options other than Waimanalo Gulch. And as you mentioned, it's close to reaching capacity, so something has to be done soon. I will say that from a fairness, from an equity standpoint, it's really not right for only for one community to have the only 2 landfills on Oahu. It's about equity, and it's about not always dumping, no pun intended, 2 landfills in one community that's on the far end of our island, and seems to always get the short end of the stick, whether it's having two landfills or allocating resources towards public education, or constructing a bypass road so that people aren't stuck in traffic if there's a tie-up on Farrington Highway, et cetera, et cetera. So that really needs to be factored in as well when deciding what to do with Waimanalo Gulch.
Okay, thank you for that. And huge question that's pre-COVID, and I think even now with COVID, it's going to become worse. Homelessness is a major concern in our city, with individuals and families living in parks, doorways, on sidewalks. It's a horrendous condition. We have to responsibility to help our neighbors and our brothers. Are your plans to solve this real crisis? We're the worst in the nation after LA, or we vie with LA. It's not a mark of pride. What is your plan to solve this for those experiencing homelessness? We know it's a complex issue, but how do we move them into proper housing? How do we create spaces for those that refuse to move into housing, and give and as needed receive appropriate social support systems, and then also to return our public spaces to their intended uses for the parks and the beaches and that sort of thing?
Well, as you mentioned, Winston, it's a crisis, and it's likely to get worse because of COVID-19 and the economic impact on families. And so there's several things that need to be done right away. First is build more housing. A lot of people are homeless because they just simply can't afford the cost to rent, and forget trying to buy a place. We're approximately 22,000 units short on Oahu to meet the demand for housing here. I've created, in response to that and the high cost of housing and the high cost of living on Oahu, a Housing for All plan that seeks to address that massive shortage of housing that we have here on Oahu. It focuses on three areas: building more housing for Oahu residents and no more for out-of-state residents, getting rid of the factors that increase the high cost of housing on Oahu, like illegal vacation rentals. There's approximately 8,000 of them on Oahu that need to be taken away or restored to the housing inventory for Oahu residents. And third, to encourage private development, primarily in the urban core. The other two areas that need to be addressed are, for decades, we've seen a slow erosion in funding for mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment. We need to increase those services, spend more on those services, because in the long run, it's going to save the city and the state money if we get the people on the streets who need help, the help they need. So build more affordable housing, provide more substance abuse and mental health treatment services, and then finally engage in more partnerships to solve the housing crisis or the homelessness crisis, like Kahawiki Village near in the Ke'ehu Lagoon area. It's a project that built 144 homes, took 600 homeless people off the street, 144 families basically, with 600 people, including 300 children. It was a partnership with the state government, city government, private sector, and the nonprofit sector. We need to do more of those partnerships to solve homelessness and a lot of other complicated issues on this island.
Yes, and thank you. It is complicated. We all have to recognize we're not going to solve problems in 2 minutes, but we appreciate your candor in joining us. And I want to, before your final question, note that you probably have a lot of information at your website, which is amemiyaformayor.com, I believe. And so people can go there and find out a lot more and follow up with their own questions. As a final question, what does a vision of a sustainable, a beautiful, livable Honolulu mean to you? And are there any final thoughts that you'd like to leave viewers with?
So the question is, what's my vision of a sustainable Oahu?
Sustainable, beautiful, livable Honolulu, Oahu, mean to you? And are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave viewers with?
Okay, so I envision what everyone here envisions: a walkable, livable, vibrant city with multiple modes of transportation, a place that everyone can afford housing, a place that is safe and clean, with beautiful parks and beautiful beaches, a place that you want to live, work, play, and raise a family. A place that is, multicultural, multi-ethnic, with the best technology available. Let's have 5G all over Oahu, so that everyone has fair access to technology and information that they need, whether it's senior citizens to professionals to our students in our public schools. A city that we can all be proud of, a city that we want to live in, and a city that we don't worry that our children and our grandchildren won't be able to afford and will move away to the mainland. I mean, that's the fear I mentioned earlier with my wife and I, our college-age son. He's going to school away on the mainland. We hope he comes back. We don't know if he'll come back, and that's really sad because he wants to come back. And so again, I share the same values and concerns and visions of Hawaii. Last thing, we have to address climate change because we owe it to our future generations. Most of us won't face the full brunt and impact of climate change if we don't address it. But that's still wrong. That's still not right. I mean, there are generations before that made sacrifices for us to enjoy the Oahu that we have. We need to pay it forward and do the same for our future generations. I can't do it alone. I will engage groups like yours that are concerned citizens that care about Oahu, are passionate about Oahu, have great ideas, and I commit to continuing to work with groups like yours as your mayor to build a better and stronger Oahu. And in closing, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I humbly ask for your vote and your support come November 3rd. And actually, it's not really November 3rd. It's an all-mail-in ballot election, as all of you know. And as most of you may know, ballots will be mailed as soon as next week, Monday, October 5th. So the election is here and upon us. And so please look out for your mail. Please encourage your family and friends to exercise their right to vote and have a say in our political process. And if those of you haven't registered to vote or know people that haven't registered yet, the registration deadline is also next Monday, October 5th. It's very easy to register to vote online or on your smartphone, as I tell my younger supporters that can't do without their smartphone for not even 1 second in the day, that it's very easy to register on your smartphone as well, 3 to 4 minutes maximum. So get out and vote, have your voice heard, and thank you very, very much for the opportunity to speak before all of you today.
Thank you. And thank you for that. It's a great reminder for us that we are all in it together. We, as I said last night, when people say they need to do something about that, well, they is we, and we are in charge of the process. We decide together, and it's up to us to make our city good and at the best place that we can make it. And we applaud you for standing for the candidacy of mayor. And if you are chosen by the voters, we will certainly look forward to working with your administration. All of our groups will. And thank you again for joining us tonight. Please know that we'll have this information it's posted on the Outdoor Circles Facebook page. It'll be available, and we will post them also on our respective pages. And everybody get out there, vote, do your part as a citizen, get active in your community, just like these great groups are. And anyway, Mr. Amemiya, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.